Here we are. Let's have this experience, shall we? It is now time to prep for 2026. And some of us are resting and relaxing, like the cats back there. And for the rest of us, we're starting to look at pattern recognition. So take your idea of prediction of what 2026 is going to be about, and let's move it into the framework of pattern recognition, because I think that's where these practices can be most helpful to us. You can think about numerology as a way of forecasting or focusing your energy for the year ahead, the month ahead, the week ahead. And when you take that approach, is what are the patterns that I can recognize? Then we start to be a little bit more clear on what direction to choose, right? So if you see the pattern, the key is to adjust to the pattern, not what is being said and not what the other person's relationship to you is, but what is the pattern that I'm seeing? And once you establish what you're looking at, it makes it so much easier to move forward, to experience, and to make some changes. Okay. So if you are in your midlife like me, or maybe coming to it, and you found that, hey, I'm not feeling seen in the way that I need to. My needs are not being heard. I don't know what my boundaries are. I can't even establish them because I don't even know what they are. Then numerology offers an incredibly useful spiritual insight into how all of that works. And that's what I want to help you out with today. I'm going to give you a brief overview about how all this works, how it's connected to Kundalini Yoga, and then let's go through month by month, shall we? So that you can find your bearings, and then you could come back to this particular video and just track where you are and what's happening. But first of all, my name is Salima, yoga therapist. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to give me a little wave, you want to put a little note here in the chat so that I know you're watching. If you could tell me what your birth month is, that would be helpful too, so I know who is here and what we can accomplish together. Okay. So let's start with what is Kundalini Yoga? Because some of you might be here for the first time. And I want to just remind you of what this lineage is all about. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of schools of yoga, of lineages of yoga. And this one in particular, Kundalini Yoga, is the yoga of awareness. Now, what does that mean? This is about your consciousness. And so the practices here, most of us, myself included, we refer to it or relate to it in a spiritual way. So this isn't the yoga to get super fit, although you can do that. This isn't the yoga to tighten your abs or do anything like that. This is really about working with your nervous system. This is about using time-tested techniques, sound vibration, breath work, meditation, movement, coordinated movement to work with the nervous system. And that's what's brilliant about this practice is that even before we knew of this language around the nervous system, Kundalini Yoga was there, doing that anyway. And here's the key is that when your nervous system is feeling aligned, in other words, you can identify what's happening. Am I in protection mode? Am I in connection mode? Then it's so much easier to make decisions. When your stress is being dealt with, I'm not saying gone. Notice I didn't say gone. When you are dealing with your stress, then your mind and your heart coherence is much more able to take on whatever challenges are ahead of you. So in other words, you don't react, you start to step back, pause, observe, and then make your challenges from there, make your decisions from there. Okay. So amazing. We have some people coming in here. Birthdays in January, birthday in December. Okay. Happy belated. We're going to get to all of those birthday months and really allow some new information, because what I always think about with numerology is that there's this change in perspective. Okay. So Kundalini Yoga is the yoga of awareness. It really starts to work with the nervous system. And when you start to dial your nervous system down, it becomes so much easier to make clear decisions, to notice what patterns are happening before we make it personal. Okay. So as we step in, I want you to remember these three tenets. Nothing is personal. Nothing is permanent and nothing is perfect, including you and me. Okay, so nothing is permanent, nothing is personal, and nothing is perfect. And if we can walk in with that kind of idea that what we're doing now is working with our bodies, first and foremost, and then we're applying the science and the art of numerology in order to move in the direction and to be aware of the patterns so that we can make really good, informed decisions about what's happening. Remember, our goal here is to act and not react. Because once we're reacting, that can lead to a big snowball kind of experience. Okay, so that is what Kundalini Yoga is. And if you found yourself here on this channel, this is specifically for you. If you've been through childhood trauma, if you're navigating a transition in your life, you feel like maybe your identity is changing, your kids are growing up, they've left, your relationship has changed, maybe you're single for the first time in a long time, maybe you're taking on understanding your sexuality or your gender identity differently. And all of that applies. That's where we need the support of our nervous system to dial down old survival patterns, to step into using our voice, to creating boundaries, and to really recognizing what is sacred about our life experience. It's coming from that place. What is sacred to me? And that's the way these two things work together. So on my channel here, there are hundreds of Kundalini yoga practices, literally. And so numerology becomes the tool that we can use in order to choose the perfect Kriya, meditation, breath work for where you are right now. So these are sister sciences. And if Kundalini Yoga is the medicine, then numerology is the prescription. That's how we're going to work through this today. Okay. So now how do we approach numerology? We look at all 5 digits of your date of birth. So we look at the day, month, and year of birth. There's some calculations to be made, and all of those calculations are looking to reduce a number from 11 and under. And so that's the premise. And each of those numbers, 1 through 11, gives us a numerological representation of qualities and characteristics. Okay, so there's a quality for the number 1. There are blind spots for the number 1. There are things to be working on if you have a 1 in your numerology. That's the idea of it. And again, we go back to pattern recognition. How do I understand myself in relation to what this number is offering me in terms of insight, and where are my patterns? Am I leaning into the advantage here, or am I hanging out over here where the shadow side is? And again, there's no judgment here. It is being able to recognize, and once we recognize, again, so much more clarity. Okay. So before I go any further, remember that if you're looking for your own numerology session, all the links are below. You can find that, click the link, book a time, make your payment, and you and me, one-to-one, we get to discuss all of this, because I'm doing something general here for everybody to get a sense of. But if you would want to come a little bit closer and get some real clear insights on how to use this information, what practices to draw on, and then what are the next steps after that, I got you. Okay. So remember, all the links are below. The Kundalini Yoga training, also the links are below. If you're here and you find this fascinating, I highly recommend. That's the next one. Okay. So if you're somebody who has chosen to go down the path of peace, let's say you want to avoid conflict. Let's say you have found yourself in many years of fawning, trying to make things right, trying to avoid conflict. Then once we look at these patterns, what we're really doing is revealing conditioning. And again, this is not your fault. If you're here, you've already understood Something's not working. I need to pull a lever so that this feels better. So let me walk you through all of these months now and ask yourself the question, how do I relate to this? Okay. And you can find information and inspiration, whether this is your birth month or whether this is the day that you were born on. Okay. So if you were born in January, the key here is to really focus on how you define yourself. So in other words, as women, we're looking at what is our usefulness, our reliability, what's the emotional labor that we're putting out there. And so do you lead with your heart or do you lead with your head? Or is it somewhere in between? Where do you shift yourself in order to get along and to stay accepted? And notice where your needs are in the pecking order of the people around you. Are you placing yourself first and foremost, or do you come here after the dog and the car? So in the month of January, we are asking ourselves to stop performing, to balance our head and our heart and to be there completely and start to make decisions from that place. In February, we look at relationships. Where are we overgiving? Where do we find a sense of feeling drained? Who is it? Who is it that drains our energy? And where does love become labor? Because, we all know that love requires effort, but where does it become labor? And where does it become labor that is not reciprocal? So pay attention when you are listening more than you're speaking, and where you're carrying weight for others. This is using your discernment. If you can use your discernment in this situation, where are things getting unbalanced? That's where connection is costing you more energy than it is restoring. Okay, so remember that not all relationships are we're not in 50-50 relationships with everybody. Sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 60-40, something like that, but it should at some point even out. So maybe you're drawing a little more or drawing a little less, but not you less all the time. And that's where things start to hurt and get unbalanced. In March, we're looking at about expression. Where do you censor yourself? Noticing where your body starts to tighten. Somebody walks in the room, somebody who you feel like you want to be close to, but your body tightens. Your back is up, you feel defensive. And that's where a pause is really required. How can I slow things down so that I can really watch the dynamic here and notice? And from a state of wanting to socialize, wanting to nurture myself, speak from that level of truth. And that's really about being safe, feeling safe. Remember that we can't be in a protective mode and fully connect. The two physiologically don't work. And same as opposite is true, is that when we're in connection mode, we're not always aware of how to protect ourselves, right? So we really want to pay attention to that. So there's a comment here, heart first, and then once hurt, then head. Yeah. And this is the challenge, right, of working with other people, especially when you're seeing toxic cycles, maybe for the first time. Maybe you're noticing people are around you, they're saying yes, they're willing to hang out, but there's something a little distant or cold about how they're doing that. Or maybe their advice is not in your best interest. Or maybe they give you advice and then they disappear. Like, okay, now you deal with the fallout of taking this decision. And it's really important to pay attention to this. We are finishing off the year of the snake. And a big part of this year of the snake has been about, slithering away from things that aren't fully nurturing or nourishing. And that's a really important component to be thinking about right now. And yes, if we are feeling self-defensive, if we are defending against other people in our lives, then it's not the best opportunity to connect with ourselves, and it's not the best opportunity to connect with anybody else. And so this is a really good comment, and thank you for those of you who are listening and offering some commentary in the chat. That's really helpful for me too, to know what you're thinking about. Okay, so let's move on now. April, when we get to April, this is about foundations, right? It's the fourth month, so we're looking at what's the foundation, what's the square, and this is where we want to get really clear on what is your nervous system doing. Because once we're clear on that, again, the patterns become much easier to point out. So if you notice I'm overgiving, please know that that is a survival strategy. That's not your, I'm going to call you out here. That's not your personality. That's not just your nature. That is how you have learned how to keep yourself safe. Somewhere along your timeline, you have received the message that your worthiness, your safety is depending on how much you give, how much you take care, and how much caretaking you do for everybody else. And this is a very tough lesson. Remember, again, it's conditioning. It's not necessarily who we are, but rather a strategy for how am I going to work this out? And chances are, my sweethearts, that if you have found yourself in a place of overgiving, overcompensating, oversaying, overdoing, lacking any boundaries, it means that something in your environment also feels unsafe. And when you get to that recognition and you look around and you're able to spot where those pieces are, it is a reckoning. It is a wake-up call. And not easy. Okay, so that's why this channel is existing, so that you can do Kundalini Yoga, strengthen yourself, strengthen your nervous system, understand, bring yourself to conscious awareness of what's going on, and then make some really clear decisions. And you don't have to do that alone. Okay, Numerology Consult is a great way to hone your path forward. And Kundalini Yoga training is an incredible way to put yourself in a solid foundational container so that for the next 12 months, you are accountable to you, to changes you want to make, to the transformation that is your birthright. You do not have to keep everything the same. That's not what this is about. Okay, so in April, you're looking at your routines, you're looking at where you get exhausted, what keeps you braced instead of feeling grounded. When we move over to May, we're looking at growth versus fear. Okay, so growth means disappointing people, noticing when people resist your boundaries, noticing where your changes create ruffled feathers for the people around you because it threatens belonging. And then notice where you stay smaller than your capacity. Right? Oftentimes, when there's something predatory in our environments, we will shrink in order to avoid being the target. I mean, how many times can you get yelled at? How many times do you get yelled at before you want to not say anything? How many times does somebody give you the silent treatment or withdraw their companionship because you've spoken your truth? And how many times will you continue to do that and still maintain your full sense of self? Okay, so these are really tough lessons, and I want to give them to you right up front so that you know what you're dealing with. When we get to June, we're looking at sacred responsibility. So that is it's emotional responsibility for looking after yourself. And this is where we as women, we as queer folks, this is where we often confuse care for sacrifice. And we don't want to sacrifice our nature, our pleasure, our happiness, our embodiment, our joy in order to appease other people. So here's the month. June is the month where you ask, whose feelings am I managing? And what would happen if I stopped? So for July, we're looking at inner truth. So I'm looking at the arc line of the entire year. So the month of July asks us to look inward. Where does doubt creep in? Where might you be needing some more boundaries? Because July is about your aura. And our aura, by its nature, is expansive. And at the same time, it's really important to focus so that you don't leak energy out into places that, number one, nobody asked you. Number two, none of your business. Number three, you get to take care of yourself. You actually need to take care of yourself. So where is that quiet voice inside of you already giving you insight on what you already know? August is about power. It's about where you create your authority, reinforcing those boundaries that you started to become aware of in the month before. And where do you force yourself to say yes, even when your body says no? Where am I super tired, but I'll drag myself out of bed because we need to go to the grocery store, or we need to do this, or somebody else needs me to go and pick up something. So remember that power isn't about force, power is about clarity. So it does not about doing more, but rather being clear and taking actions from that place of clarity. September is about release, it's about endings, not necessarily dramatic, but honest. How much longer can I do this? No more. And what roles have we outgrown? What habits are draining? What am I doing now? How am I contributing to all of this? And remember that releasing is an act of self-respect. October is about asking you to trust yourself, instead of deferring to somebody else's opinion, going where everybody else wants to go for dinner, actually saying, hey, today I really want to eat sushi. Okay, so maybe we could just all order in our own stuff so that I can have what I want, you all can have what you want. So rather than sacrificing, it's about, okay, claiming that, not second guessing. And where do we hand away authority instead of being sovereign and radiant in our own selves? November is about intuition. This is where we want to be integrating all the things that we are, what our mind knows, what our wisdom over the years has accumulated, and then how do we move with that kind of insight? And that is body first. That's listening inward. And then December 2026 is where you start to see the full pattern. How people are at the end of relationships is generally how they've been all the way through. So if you notice that you've been honest and genuine, authentic, and asking for support, and the other person's been lacking accountability, getting angry and upset when somebody is asking for accountability, then you know that that's been going on the whole time. And when you get to that place of completion, making that a declaration, okay, I'm done here. The tail end of this might continue for a little bit, but I am done. Year 10 is really still closing up. In some schools of numerology, there is the pattern of there is a identification with a year 1. This is actually year 10 in this school of numerology, which means we're still brushing, still tidying up the pieces, still separating things out, still taking a look at things. A lot of dramatic endings have already happened, but there will be some cleanup still ahead. And so when you go into it with that understanding, you can do the work that's required now. Okay, so numerology helps you to see the pattern. And thank you all for dropping your comments. There's a comment here about Isha practice. Is it okay to do Kundalini Yoga? Please guide. Yes, of course. Kundalini Yoga doesn't need an initiation. Kundalini Yoga needs your curiosity, needs your reverence, your respect, just like we would respect any other school of knowledge or body of knowledge or lineage of knowledge. I humbly suggest that if you're coming from another wisdom tradition, that you really focus on this one for 40 days. Dive in, find something that you feel really interested in, a topic that appeals to you, and really dive in. It would be better not to mix up all kinds of different practices because they all energetically have a different way of of moving energy. So if you find yourself interested and curious, then I would suggest that you really go in and go full force, okay? And just do that for a little bit of time and notice. So numerology is about helping you to see the container. Your body will often show us, our bodies will show us what's the cost of this pattern, and change requires a container. That's why I'm inviting you into a conversation, because it's one thing to get this from having a conversation here online for everybody. It's another thing when we go one-to-one and you can tell me what's actually going on, and we can take a look at situations from there and take a look at Kundalini Yoga as a medicine from there. So, and this is why women often need to move from insight into practice. And that's why the nervous system is such an important piece. You can know something here. 20% of decisions and change come from here, and 80% comes from here. And that's why Kundalini Yoga is so important. That is also why Kundalini Yoga training is so important. Because, just like everybody here, you probably dabbled in all kinds of things, tried this, tried this, tried this. And that kind of down the rabbit hole approach gives you a lot of conversation starters, but it doesn't necessarily give you the kind of tangible results that you're looking for. And that's why I want to introduce you to that next step. Okay, Kundalini Yoga is a starting place where we get your practice up and running. And then next is to look at getting into a container so that you really understand what this practice is all about, what it can offer you, and how you lead yourself through strengthening your nervous system, releasing old survival patterns, reclaiming your voice, solidifying your identity, because we don't need to spend any more time in burnout. We don't need to self-abandon anymore. We don't need to be emotionally exhausted in this life. Like that's not okay. And that real change, I'll say this to you very honestly, is that real change doesn't happen until you get to that, okay, I hit a wall. I just can't. This is a no-go. I can't anymore. I'm having great results from Kundalini Yoga, but this is not enough. There's more. I know there's more, right? And so that's when you come into community. That's when you come into structure. You come into mentorship. You come into accountability because you're worth it, right? So those are the things I want to share with you. 2026 is going to be fascinating. It is a year of unfolding just a little bit more, and a perfect time to dive into your spiritual practice, because it's not just about you and me. It's about how do we fit into much bigger picture. And when I keep in mind that the universe, God, creator, divine energy, that is another element and component of how I'm living my life, so much feels like an exhale, right? So let's do that together now. It can feel like a conscious awareness of the next steps rather than panic and feeling burnt out and squandering our energy. It can feel like as simple as an exhale. Okay, thank you for joining me. Lots of love to you. All the links are below. I look forward to meeting all of you. Thank you for those of you who mentioned your circumstances in the chat, who shared some information, some insights there. It's amazing to be with you. My name is Salima, yoga therapist. Come and join me. Let's take this path.